The sirens had been wailing for hours. At first, it was just background noise, part of the city's usual chaos. But now, there was a pattern, a relentless urgency that gnawed at my nerves. I stood by the window, phone in hand, watching the street below. It looked normal enough, except for the way people moved, quickly, heads down, clutching their belongings like something was pushing them forward. No panic, just tension. Everyone was in a hurry, and no one wanted to be noticed. I looked down at my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. Still no answer. I dialed again, pressing the phone to my ear, listening to the hollow ring echo through the silence of my apartment. Voicemail again. "Mike, it's me. Call me when you get this, okay?" I left another message, trying to keep my voice steady. As I hung up, my fingers trembled slightly. I turned on the TV. The news was on, the anchor's voice rising with every passing second. Authorities are urging all residents to remain indoors as emergency services work to contain violent incidents spreading across several neighborhoods. My heart skipped a beat as I watched shaky footage from a helicopter. The camera panned over streets that looked too familiar, people running, cars abandoned at crooked angles, a fire burning in the distance. But it wasn't clear what was happening or why. Something was wrong. Something big. I grabbed my jacket and keys, shoving them into my pockets. I had to find Mike. He should have been home hours ago, and now the streets felt like a trap closing in. I couldn't just sit here, waiting for his call. Not with everything going on. When I stepped outside, the heat hit me like a wall. It was one of those unbearable summer days where the air sticks to your skin, but today the streets were different. Cars were left running in the middle of the road, their doors wide open, like their drivers had abandoned them in a rush. A quiet, eerie calm had settled over the city. Too quiet for this time of day. I kept walking, unsure where I was heading. Maybe I could catch a bus downtown, find a way to get to Mike's office. But the further I went, the more the city felt wrong. Trash littered the sidewalks, bags, shoes, broken bottles, but no one was around to explain the chaos. The distant sound of sirens still echoed through the streets, a constant reminder that something terrible was unfolding, just out of sight. As I turned a corner, I saw a man sitting against the wall of a convenience store, his head slumped forward. My instinct told me to ask if he was okay, but something about the way he was sitting, motionless, his shoulders twitching every few seconds, made me hesitate. His clothes were stained, dirt smeared across his shirt, and an uneasy feeling crept up my spine. I walked faster. Further down the street, more people appeared, walking slowly, their faces blank, dazed. The city felt like it was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't understand. Whatever was happening wasn't normal. It wasn't just panic or riot. This was something worse. I cut through an alley, hoping to find a shortcut to Mike's office. That's when I heard it, a low, gurgling sound, like someone choking, coming from the shadows. My pulse quickened. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer, peering into the alley. There was a man, hunched over, his back to me. His shoulders shook with every ragged breath, and his skin looked strange, pale and gray, like he hadn't seen the sun in days. "Hey, are you okay?" I called out, my voice small, tentative. He didn't respond. Instead, he slowly turned his head toward me, and I froze. His eyes were bloodshot, wide, and his mouth hung open, stained with something dark, blood. The gurgling sound grew louder, his breath uneven, and he took a slow, dragging step toward me, his foot scraping the pavement. My heart pounded in my chest, fear crawling up my spine. Something wasn't right with him. I took a step back, my throat dry, and without waiting another second, I turned and ran. I ran until I hit the main road again, the world around me blurring into a chaotic mess of noise and movement. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the once calm streets had erupted into something far more sinister. People were everywhere now, some running, others stumbling in confusion. The air was thick with smoke, sharp and acrid, mixing with the sounds of distant shouting and crashing metal. I needed to find Mike. He wasn't answering his phone, but maybe he was still at work, waiting for me. The thought kept me moving, even though the dread gnawing at my chest was growing stronger by the minute. As I passed an alley, I heard another noise, this time, the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. I ducked behind a dumpster, peeking around the corner just in time to see two men smashing the windows of a convenience store. They were frantic, pulling cans and bottles off the shelves, their voices high-pitched and panicked. I didn't stay to hear what they were saying. I couldn't afford to stop. The deeper I went into the city, the worse it became. People wandered the streets, aimless, their movements slow and jerky, like they were puppets controlled by invisible strings. My heart sank as I passed more of them, some slumped against walls, others lying in the middle of the street, unmoving. And still, no one seemed to know what was happening. I cut through another alley, my breath coming in sharp bursts. I had to keep going, had to find Mike. But every step felt heavier, like the weight of the city was pressing down on me. My thoughts raced, images of Mike's face flashing in my mind. What if he was hurt? What if he was like them? Finally, I reached Mike's office building. It should have been bustling with people, but the entrance was deserted. The glass doors were smashed, shards glittering on the ground like a warning. I stepped inside cautiously, the eerie quiet of the lobby making my skin prickle. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the floor. "Mike?" My voice barely broke the silence. No answer. I took the stairs, my legs trembling with every step. Mike's office was on the third floor. It felt like it took forever to reach it, my heart thudding in my ears, the tension building with each creak of the old stairwell. When I reached his floor, the door to his office was wide open. Papers were scattered across the floor, chairs overturned, and the desk had been shoved against the door, like someone had tried to barricade themselves in. A sense of dread filled me as I stepped into the room, my eyes scanning the mess for any sign of him. And then, I saw the blood. A dark smear of it, leading from the desk toward the break room at the back. My stomach churned, and I swallowed hard, forcing myself to follow the trail. The door to the break room was ajar. I pushed it open slowly, afraid of what I might find. There he was. Mike, sitting against the wall, his head tilted to the side. Relief washed over me for a moment, and I rushed forward. But then I saw the wound, a deep, jagged bite on his arm, the flesh swollen and bruised. His skin was pale, his breath shallow and raspy. And when his eyes opened, they weren't his eyes anymore. They were hollow, glazed over, like he was looking through me, not at me. I stumbled back, my heart racing. "Mike?" He didn't respond. His mouth opened, a low, guttural groan escaping his lips. My hands shook as I backed away, my mind screaming that this wasn't real, that this couldn't be happening. But it was. The man I loved was gone, replaced by something else. Something infected. I turned and ran, leaving Mike behind, his groans echoing in the empty office. The streets outside were worse than before. The infected were everywhere now, wandering aimlessly, their faces blank, their movements jerky and unnatural. Panic clawed at my chest as I ran, weaving through the chaos, trying to find a way out of the city. I didn't stop running until I reached the outskirts, where the city gave way to the open road. But as I stood there, gasping for breath, a thought hit me like a punch to the gut. The virus wasn't just here. It was everywhere. There was no escape. No outrunning it. I looked back at the city, now a crumbling ruin of smoke and shadows, and knew that whatever happened next, I had to keep moving. Because if I stopped, I'd become one of them. And that was something I couldn't let happen.